Okay.
All right, good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight Mr. Ken Amai. Ken is a longtime researcher, lecturer, debater, and author on issues pertaining to worldview philosophies and various sorts of religions. In this capacity, he has posted thousands of articles on his website, has been published in an apologetics journal, and has been interviewed for radio and podcasts, and has authored circa 50 books. Ken's topic tonight is Metapologetics, Evolution as Worldview, or how to deal with potentially very detailed and complicated issues such as atheistic evolutionary claims. So please explain tonight all about how to do it. I give you Ken Amai.
Thank you so much. I did refer to meta-apologetics because that's my point tonight, is to go meta level, right? Like, for me, I've heard dozens of discussions that are extremely detailed about biology or evolution, and it's not my thing, okay? When they get like super detailed, that's just way beyond me. So I'm always thinking about, well, how can I deal with issues that are kind of beyond me when it gets to the super detailed level? When it's the kind of thing, there's some things I can wrap my head around in detail, sometimes some I can't. You know, we're all like that. We have certain things we can focus on and certain not. So then, how about a meta-level issue, right? Because, for instance, there are philosophers of biology, if you can believe that. And so that's the kind of thing they're doing. They're talking about the worldview, the philosophy, the big picture ideas. And so that's why I thought it'd be important to present a talk like this, so those of us who are not willing or able to get into that sort of level of detail. I mean, now we even have like a microbiologist, you know, what's next? Quantum biology? I mean, we already have exobiologists who pretty much do nothing, right? Because, anyhow. So now, does anyone recognize the phrase changes to allele frequencies? Changes to allele frequencies. Okay, a couple hundred of you do, okay. I'm bringing that up because nowadays, if you ask somebody, well, what do you mean when you say evolution? They're most likely to say, I'm referring to changes in allele frequencies. Okay, so that's kind of like to get us up to date, because really all this stuff about was Darwin right, was Darwin wrong, that's virtually irrelevant anymore. Yes, Darwin's skeleton still does prop up the theory of evolution, but you know, we've had NeoDarwinism, we've had Evo-Devo, we've had all these competing theories to kind of try to fix the mess he made, is the way that I would put it. And so this is the current definition that's really popular, changes in allele frequencies. In fact, somebody online told me, I'll give you $100 if you can correctly define evolution in a couple of short sentences. And I said, well, there's many definitions of evolutions, from origin of species by means of natural selection to changes in allele frequencies, etc. And by the way, no, I didn't even get 75 shekels out of that deal. Now, when we think about the title of Darwin's primary book, it's On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. And the key thing is that he was talking about the origin of species from already pre-existing species, right? They're already there, and now he's talking about, well, how do we get new ones? So that's why evolutionists like to deny that they have to deal with issues like abiogenesis, or what some would call chemical evolution. Because they're saying we're kind of starting halfway. We're starting with life already here, species already here, and just how do we get new ones, right? as if, incidentally, just labeling yourself an evolutionist means that you're not responsible for dealing with anything else. I mean, I'm not sure how that works, but they use that a lot. They'll use that to abscond from having to deal with issues that are inconvenient to their worldview, just by saying, hey, I'm an evolutionist. I don't have to bother with this other stuff. It doesn't work, but it is convenient to do what would be called running away from issues. Now, Nature.com says the allele frequency represents the incident of gene variation in population. In a population, allele frequencies are a reflection of genetic diversity. Changes in allele frequencies over time can indicate that genetic drift is occurring or that new mutations have been introduced into the population. Bottom line, it just refers to what some people call microevolution. That's pretty much it. And of course, the evolutionary line is that if you compile enough microevolution, you'll get macroevolution, right? Now, microevolution is something we could all agree on. It's just what we would call changes within kinds. But they're saying if you compound enough of those little changes within kinds, you can then jump to macroevolution, which is the origin of new species from other already pre-existing species. So that's just so that you're aware of that. And so yeah, with all these changes and updating of Darwinism, the way Vox Day put it is, few can manage to keep up with adaptive devo punk ithroi neo-quasi-Darwinism, or whatever the evolutionary biologists are calling this week's spin on St. Darwin's dangerous idea. So for instance, we have a very popular cyber atheist who says that he's not a Darwinist, he's an evolutionist. Okay, because they're recognizing that, forget all this Darwin stuff, you know, we're just on the bandwagon of the latest spin on his views and the latest theory of evolution. Now, as Philip S. Scale put it in Why Do We Invoke Darwin? Evolutionary theory contributes little to experimental biology, and that's from the journal The Scientist from 2005. He writes, natural selection makes humans self-centered and aggressive, except when it makes them altruistic and peaceable. Or natural selection produces virile men who eagerly spread their seed, except when it prefers men who are faithful protectors and providers. When an explanation is so subtle that it can explain any behavior, it is difficult to test it experimentally, much less use it as a catalyst for scientific discovery. Okay, so that's just some ideas about how the way issues are dealt with and discussed change. And so this is kind of like the latest definition of evolution, and then just how to start thinking about it, because it is supposed to be a theory of everything, right? Ultimately, biology is a science, but we'll find out Darwinism, or evolution, is a worldview philosophy. And so what Scale is pointing out is that when you're looking at any phenomena, biological phenomena, and you're just slapping the term evolution on it, it's no longer a viable theory, because you're just saying it explains absolutely everything, which means that it ultimately doesn't really explain anything. Because if you have completely opposite behaviors being labeled evolution, that just shows you it's not a viable concept, right? So online once, I posted an article that was titled, Ancient Spiders Locked in Amber Died Looking After Their Offspring. I posted this on our Facebook page, by the way. And so my comment was, to quote the article first, 98.8 million years, and then I wrote, worth of evidence of lack of evolution. Because, I mean, how do they know it's a spider? Well, because it's a spider and it looks like a spider. And it was a spider back then, it's a spider today. So that's evidence of lack of evolution. And somebody was kind enough to reply to me, this has already been explained to you. If a species doesn't need to evolve, then it won't. There must be a selection pressure which causes it to evolve. Okay. So I replied, do you troll the World Wide Web demanding adherence to other theories? We'll get back to that in a second. So I told him, I wrote 98.8 million years worth of evidence of lack of evolution. You agree with me. If a species doesn't need to evolve, then it won't. You agreed with me. We've been through this, that theory predicts X, and also the exact opposite of X, right? So I was just applying what Skell was talking about. So that we have evidence that spider is the same back then as it was today, but that's also evolution. Even though it didn't evolve, the theory still says, hey, we got that covered basically, right? We got all the bases covered. Now, in my mind, as far as the meta-level stuff, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who lived 1646 to 1716, is said to have asked the premier philosophical question when he stated, the first question that should rightly be asked is, why is there something rather than nothing? Okay, something, what? Anything. Why does anything at all exist instead of nothing at all existing? Why? And that is the premier question. And I've come to find out your answer to that question is like a line of dominoes. Once you give an answer, it's just going to kick the whole line down. And all of your views will be based on your answer to that one question. So for instance, if you say, well, there's something rather than nothing just because of an accident, right? Nothing caused nothing to explode for no reason and made everything without meaning, right? From nothing, by nothing, to nothing, for nothing, right? Everything else is based on that. You won't get away from that premise if that's the view you take. Where if you say in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, then likewise everything else will follow, just absolutely everything. And that's why it's called a worldview. It's your view of the world. And in this case, it begins with something as simple as, well, yeah, why does something exist instead of nothing? And that's going to form the core of your worldview. And then that core will inform you as to how to think about everything else, just absolutely everything. Even stuff we might find out about tomorrow. Hey, we just discovered another habitable planet. Well, how you think about that is based on your core. It's all going to be based on that, right? So then, just by talking about this, I'm already appealing to logic, even if I haven't realized it or haven't said it or haven't really even thought about it. And so in logic, we have a law such as the law of identity that would tell you that A is A. What is A? Anything. This marker is a marker, right? A is A. A is not non-A, right? This marker is not a non-marker. It is what it is. It's the identity. So A is A. A is not non-A, like a tree is a tree. And if a tree was not a tree, then a tree would no longer be. And now I'm sounding like Dr. Seuss. But see, when we think about logic, that also comes from our answer to the fundamental question, right? So I find that evolutionists will tell me that logic is a human invention, right? Humans developed to the point that we invented logic, okay? Now, in my mind, it's really, there's two things to think about. And generally, there'll be two things to think about with almost any issue, which is this epistemology and ontology, okay? So like ontology would be the thing in and of itself, whatever it is, the thing in and of itself, the absolute thing, on its own, right? Like logic would be, we'll see in a minute, we're going to play a video one in just a second, okay? Well, epistemology would be how we humans talk about the thing, and we think about the thing, and we try to figure out the thing. And so that those are two different things, but they're very important to keep in mind that we're talking about two distinct things, the thing in and of itself, and then how we think and talk about the thing. So let's play the video clip one. This is me in a discussion with Tom Jump, who goes online as T Jump, by the way, an atheist evolutionist.
So logic is a description of reality. Logic is a result of evolution, which caused us to have these things. So now I have, in my worldview, I now have logic, which I can use to justify things. So my worldview is
I know, but I mean, we both know when we say the word logic, we're really referring to two things. We're referring to naturally occurring phenomena, and then we're referring to our description of that phenomena. Right, so if we say laws of logic, we're referring to the phenomena in and of itself, and we also mean our description that we can put in pithy catchphrases like the law of non-contradiction. That's a law of logic. Yeah, but it's describing what? Well, it's describing reality. Okay. We're going to get back to this because you see that we both say, okay, we're talking about reality. Okay. He an atheist evolutionist, me a believer creationist. We agree that reality exists. I mean, you can't have a hard time disagreeing with that unless you're like deep into the New Age. That's a whole other issue. But so we're both appealing to reality. But keep in mind that his answer to the primary question and mine are different. So his view of reality and mine are going to be different. Ultimately, at the level of epistemology, we're going to get back to that. So I wanted to read a quote from C.S. Lewis. Okay, yeah, we would have issues with his view on evolution, but I think he hit the nail on the head when he wrote about something that he variously called life force philosophy, or creative evolution, or even emergent evolution. And this is from Mere Christianity, chapter 4, What Lies Behind the Law, where he says, one reason why many people find creative evolution so attractive is that it gives one much of the emotional comfort of believing in God, and none of the less pleasant consequences. When you're feeling fit and the sun is shining and you do not want to believe that the whole universe is a mere mechanical dance of atoms, it's nice to be able to think of this great mysterious force rolling on through the centuries and carrying you on its crest. If, on the other hand, you want to do something rather shabby, the life force, being only a blind force with no morals and no mind, will never interfere with you like that troublesome God we learned about when we were children. The life force is a sort of tame God. You can switch it on when you want, but it will not bother you. All the thrills of religion and none of the cost. Is the life force the greatest achievement of wishful thinking the world has yet seen? Now, my college-level biology textbook by Neil Campbell and Jane Reese, in the glossary, it defines evolution just as any and all changes that have occurred to organisms. Okay, if I ask you who believes in that, evolution, well, we'd all raise our hands. So that's just part of how we need to think about and how we need to define terms and ask people to define their terms, because if someone has that definition in mind and they ask you if you believe in evolution and you say no, they're going to be like, okay, you're just out there, way too far out there. So if you say, well, but that's not exactly the definition of evolution that is used in discussions about evolution, or how it has been used historically and how the historical use of the word has changed, right? So that's why in the intro, atheistic evolution was mentioned. So I like to distinguish, that's what I'm talking about tonight. And yes, in my many discussions online, I've referred to atheistic evolution, and I've been called a dumb for doing so. They didn't really use the word dumb, and so I would say, well, have you heard of theistic evolution? Yeah, well, then there's atheistic evolution, right? How is that even something to argue about? It's the view of evolution where it just happendism, right? Time did it, chance did it, matter did it, it did it all by itself, nothing did it. However you want to look at it, that's a whole different ballgame from our friends, the theistic evolutionists, or even deists, right? Deism would say that God, created the universe and then just kind of walked away and let it run itself. So that, yeah, evolution happens in the universe. It's virtually atheistic because God isn't involved at all, just kind of did the initial design and just let it run itself. So that's somewhat akin to theistic evolution. And I remember, by the way, when Lee Strobel came into town, someone took him to eat at Cracker Barrel, and he said there was this woman sitting outside, and as he was walking up, she said, "What is deism?" And he was like, "Wow, I've just been reading all about it." And he starts telling her it's an idea that came about in the late 1800s, and this is the motivation for it, and it's that God created and stepped away, and he's going on and on and on. And his friend tapped him and says, Lee, she didn't say what is deism. She said buenos dias. I just wish I could have seen her face, you know. Buenos dias. And this guy starts rambling on about these, you know. Yeah. So theistic evolution, deism, and then intelligent design, all of those are kind of pretty much in the same category. Okay, yeah, there's some distinctions here and there, but pretty much in the same category. And so when you're talking about theistic evolution, of course, who is the theos? Well, it could really be anybody. Who is the deos? Could be anybody. And like with intelligent design, same thing, right? So there's Jewish intelligent design proponents, such as David Berlinski. There's Christian intelligent design proponents, such as Michael Behe. There's agnostic intelligent design proponents, such as David Berlinski. And there's atheist intelligent design proponents, such as Francis Crick, who proposed directed panspermia, right? That life ended up on Earth from being brought from elsewhere in the universe. And so that's why I'm talking specifically about atheistic evolution, is to not, within this talk, get into the issues of those who would say that God had something to do with it. We're talking about no God involvement whatsoever, right? So now a word about NeoDarwinism, which is really just a modernized version of Darwin's theory, but that was incorporated with genetics, because genetics weren't a part of Darwin's original theory. There was really no such thing back then, so that was kind of added to it. But I did want to point out that there's a certain local intelligent design proponent who works at a certain nationally relevant lab, you know, and I remember he had said something, so I emailed him and I said, "You noted that you use NeoDarwinism in your work at the lab. Are you referring to algorithms?" And he replied, "In my work we use mutation and natural selection to improve the performance of enzymes. I also use that approach to adapt organisms to break down waste. It is a very weak mechanism, but it can help for some things. I can improve already existing functions." Okay, I wonder if you caught certain qualifying terms in there. Okay. So note that if it was strictly neo-Darwinism, it's just stuff that's happening all its own, right? Blind, random, unguided, uninterfered with, without a plan, without a goal in mind, right? None of that. So let me read that again. In my work, we use mutations and natural selection to improve the performance of enzymes. I also use that approach to adapt, almost every word is a qualifying term, organisms to break down waste. It is a very weak mechanism, but it can help for some things. It can improve already existing functions. So then I asked him, so when you say mutation, do you mean that you do things to cause mutations? and then select which organisms have the most resultant mutations that are beneficial for the purposes of improving the performance of enzymes? Yes. I hope you can appreciate that, because I mean, I had a biologist. That was the whole discussion, and I was like, wow, I learned so much from that. So basically, he is the selecting. First of all, he's the intelligence, right? Using intelligently designed equipment to design an experiment, and he's purposefully putting little organisms into it, making sure they're nice and taken care of, tucking them in at night, and then he's purposely causing mutations, and then he's purposely selecting just the ones, right? I mean, the whole thing is, okay, it's intelligent design. He's saying that up front, but then don't tell me it's actually NeoDarwinism, right? It's not. It can't be. It can't be. I mean, as an intelligent design proponent, you are doing intelligent design. That is what you're doing. I get it. But let's not claim that we're doing NeoDarwinism. I mean, if anything, I don't know what you want to call it, mathematics, genetics, but yeah, so I thought that was, and that's just part of what I mean by the meta level stuff, right? So it's just that I was able to pick out his qualifying terms, and I was like, wait a minute, he's actually saying something very different from the blanket claim that it's NeoDarwinism, okay? So now we come to a very important issue, kind of going back to the whole worldview thing and the answer to the premier philosophical question. Charles Darwin wrote a letter to William Graham in 1881 where he said something very, very important and insightful. He says, "The horrid doubt always arises whether the conviction of a man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind, if there are any convictions in such a mind?" Okay, now see, that's very, very important. And you could tell this is beyond biology now. He's like looking at this at a meta level, on a philosophical level, and saying, well, what does this mean about something as fundamental as the functioning of our mind? Is it producing anything that's actually reliable or trustworthy? Because of developed from the minds of lower animals, right? And he's wondering if the conviction of a monkey mind, from whence he's saying we came, or if they have any conviction at all. And the descent of man, he said, in a series of forms gradually increasing, in a series of forms graduating incessantly from some ape-like creature to man, as he now exists, it would be impossible to fix on any definite point when the term man ought to be used. Okay, so he's talking about how in our evolution from what he had previously said were monkeys, now he's updating it to apes, and there is a difference there, but whatever. That we can't even really pinpoint when does an ape stop being an ape and start becoming a man, right, a human. And that was Darwin way back then. Video clip 2, please. This is Richard Dawkins just a few years ago.
I'm an ape.
Yeah.
Are you, Bishop?
I'm not.
Okay.
I definitely am not. I'm special. Made in the image of God, in the creative mind of God, creative as God is, who made me. That's the difference between the ape and me.
Well, I'm an ape. I'm an African ape. And
Yeah.
I'm very proud to be an African ape.
Yeah.
And so should you be.
Yeah. Pride comes before destruction. A haughty spirit before a fall. But, so, I mean, nothing's really changed, right? According to Richard Dawkins, he himself is an ape, like right now. And so are we all, of course. Okay, so that's a very important claim to keep in mind, that they're claiming that through blind random processes, We, however you want to put it, evolved from apes or still apes, or however the individual atheist evolutionist wants to put it. But I mean, this is like now. And so the question, when we think back to what Darwin said, is, well, what is truth? Right? And I mean, that's something Pontius Pilate asked, and apparently he didn't know. The one he was speaking to said, I am the truth. So, well, what's all this stuff about truth? That's something that we're going to get to here. And so part of my point